What if I told you that the very institution most praised by society, marriage, is the same chain that has destroyed the lives of countless great men? What if I told you that love, that sacred illusion sung by poets and worshipped by religions, was never designed to protect men, but to bind them, tame them, and bleed them of their strength? Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher of fire and hammer, dared to whisper a forbidden truth. Marriage is not a sanctuary. It is a trap. A carefully constructed snare that lures men with the promise of comfort, legacy, and intimacy, only to cage their will to power and crush their greatness. Nietzsche did not speak against love lightly. He spoke as a man who saw the destiny of human beings written in struggle, ambition, and creation. For him, marriage was too often the graveyard of male potential. He warned, "The higher a man aims, the more dangerous it becomes to surrender his freedom for a fleeting passion." Great men are not destroyed by enemies, but by the women they love. Before we begin, hit that like button, subscribe, and type "trap" in the comments if you're ready to face the truths polite society will never tell you. Because by the end of this video, you will see marriage not as a dream, but as the oldest prison built for men. For Nietzsche, love was never pure, never innocent. He called it a battlefield disguised as tenderness. While poets sang of eternal devotion, Nietzsche stripped away the veil. He saw in love the claws of instinct, the cunning of nature, and the hunger for power. He warned that marriage transforms passion into contract, wildfire into daily duty. What once elevated becomes routine, what once inspired becomes suffocating. Nietzsche argued that women, shaped by centuries of survival, see love not as an end but as a tool. Behind the vows of forever is the demand for security, stability, and control over the male spirit. Love binds a man not just emotionally, but legally, financially, and socially. He ceases to belong to himself. He becomes a husband, a role more powerful than his individuality. This suspicion was not born from bitterness, but from clarity. Nietzsche admired passion but hated cages. He saw love as a trap that lures men with ecstasy and then chains them with obligation. He asked, "What is left of a man's greatness when his fire has been redirected into endless compromise?" For Nietzsche, the risk was not just heartbreak, but the slow death of ambition itself. Marriage, Nietzsche argued, is not a romantic promise, but a social institution, a tool designed by society to domesticate men. Every culture praises marriage because it turns dangerous, ambitious men into predictable providers. Once married, a man is bound to his duties, providing for a wife, raising children, and fitting into the expectations of the community. He is no longer wild, no longer free. He has been tamed. Nietzsche compared marriage to a legal trap, a contract that appears voluntary, but is loaded with obligations that restrict the man's will. Women, society, and religion all converge to push men into this contract. Why? Because uncontrolled men are a threat, but married men are manageable. Their strength is harnessed, their rebellion softened, their fire redirected into family life. For Nietzsche, this was a tragedy for great men, philosophers, artists, creators. These men are born to pursue truth, beauty, and power, but marriage diverts their energy into compromise. Instead of battling with destiny, they battle over trivialities within the household. Instead of carving their name into eternity, they drown in daily routine. The contract of marriage, Nietzsche believed, is less about love and more about control. And the higher the man, the heavier the chain. Marriage, Nietzsche argued, kills ambition not with violence, but with comfort. The fire that drives a man to create, conquer, and transcend must be fueled by hunger, solitude, and risk. Yet marriage replaces hunger with stability, solitude with companionship, risk with routine. The very conditions that forge greatness are stripped away. Nietzsche saw countless men surrender their dreams after marriage. The artist who once poured his soul into creation begins to pour his soul into domestic life. The philosopher who wrestled with eternal truths begins to wrestle with bills, expectations, and compromises. Slowly, ambition dies not in a dramatic collapse, but in a quiet suffocation. Women, Nietzsche suggested, may not even realize they are part of this process. They are driven by instinct, the desire for security, the need to protect children, the demand for stability. But this instinct stands opposed to male ambition, which thrives on danger, struggle, and chaos. In the union of marriage, instinct often wins and greatness fades. For Nietzsche, the tragedy was not that men stopped loving, but that they stopped becoming. He warned, "Beware of the comfort that kills. Beware of the embrace that softens your strength. For in that softness lies the slow death of everything you could have been." Nietzsche believed that women are not guided by conscious philosophy, but by primal instinct, instincts older than morality, older than civilization itself. At the heart of this instinct is the demand for security. For women, marriage is less about romance and more about survival. It is the guarantee of protection, provision, and stability in a chaotic world. But this instinct, Nietzsche argued, is at odds with the male pursuit of greatness. Men who seek to create, conquer, and rise above the herd cannot also provide the endless security women desire. The great man belongs to danger, to uncertainty, to risk. Yet, marriage demands he surrender those risks for the sake of stability. Nietzsche saw this as the silent war between the sexes. Women pulling men towards safety, men striving toward danger. When the man gives in, he loses his fire. When he resists, he risks isolation. But the balance almost always tilts toward compromise, and compromise is poison for ambition. In Nietzsche's eyes, this was not malice, but biology. Women instinctively seek the nest, while men instinctively seek the horizon. Marriage ties the horizon to the nest, shackling men to a life that was never theirs to begin with. For Nietzsche, marriage was not simply personal, it was social. He argued that marriage is one of the most powerful tools the herd uses to control individuals. The herd society at large fears the lone, untamed man. He is unpredictable, dangerous, uncontrollable. But once married, even the strongest man is drawn into the herd's orbit. Marriage forces conformity. A husband must think of his wife's reputation, his children's future, his in-laws' expectations. His decisions are no longer his own. He is no longer free to live as a creator or a rebel, but must live as a provider and citizen. His fire, once threatening to the herd, is extinguished for the sake of social peace. Nietzsche despised this process because it turned lions into sheep. Men born with the potential to challenge the world were reduced to caretakers of small households. The herd praises marriage because it tames men. The state supports marriage because it creates stable workers. Religion sanctifies marriage because it makes obedience sacred. But in this alliance, the individual genius is sacrificed. Nietzsche's brutal truth was this: the herd praises marriage not for the happiness of the man, but for the safety of the collective. And if greatness is to survive, it must resist the herd, even at the cost of loneliness. Nietzsche once wrote, "Woman is not even a problem, woman is the greatest danger." To him, women were not simply companions, but destiny itself. Why? Because a man's choice of woman determines the fate of his life. A weak man destroyed by a bad marriage is forgotten. A strong man bound to the wrong woman wastes his greatness in battles he never should have fought. For Nietzsche, women embody nature's cunning. They pull men away from transcendence back into biology, back into the cycle of family, reproduction, and security. He saw women as representatives of life's most basic instincts, while great men represent life's highest possibilities. The tension is inevitable. Will the man serve biology, or will he serve his destiny? Marriage, in this framework, is the most dangerous gamble a man can take. Choose wrong, and you are trapped. Choose right, and perhaps you still sacrifice too much. Nietzsche asked, Why should the highest men risk everything for a union that rarely elevates them? In his writings, he did not call for hatred of women, but for awareness. Women are not evil, but they are powerful, and the man who underestimates that power becomes its victim. The great lie of marriage, Nietzsche argued, is the promise of eternal love. He saw love not as a permanent state, but as a fleeting madness, a burst of instinct, lust, and illusion. To turn this madness into a lifelong contract was, to him, absurd. Nietzsche mocked the poets and priests who spoke of everlasting devotion. For him, love fades because it is born of chemistry and biology, not of eternal truth. When passion dies, what remains? Duty, compromise, and boredom. And yet society convinces men to bind themselves forever to what was only meant to be temporary. This illusion destroys countless men. Believing in eternal love, they build their lives around it. When it fades, they are trapped in obligations they cannot escape: financial, legal, emotional. Nietzsche called this the cruelty of marriage. It asks permanence from something that was never permanent to begin with. To him, the wise man sees love as fire, beautiful, dangerous, but short-lived. He enjoys it, but he does not chain himself to its ashes. Only the fool mistakes the flame for the sun and builds his life around it. Nietzsche believed that the greatest men are destined for solitude, not because they hate people, but because their vision and strength isolate them. The higher the man climbs, the fewer companions he can find. Marriage, however, forces intimacy, constant presence, and compromise. For Nietzsche, this was a death sentence for the higher man. The creator, the thinker, the conqueror requires silence, space, and freedom. His genius thrives in solitude, but marriage invades that solitude with noise, demands, and domestic concerns. The wife, even if loving, becomes a constant presence. For ordinary men, this is comfort. For higher men, it is suffocation. Nietzsche warned that solitude is the price of greatness. To share your life too deeply is to dilute your vision. He argued that the higher man must learn to embrace loneliness, to turn solitude into strength. Marriage, by pulling him away from that solitude, threatens his very destiny. This was not a rejection of love, but of entanglement. The higher man may love, but he must never be bound. His solitude is his fortress. To abandon it for comfort is to betray himself. Society tells men that the ultimate goal is domestic happiness, a wife, children, a home, stability. Nietzsche saw this as a trap, a golden cage that lures men with warmth while robbing them of greatness. Domestic life promises peace, but peace is the enemy of creation. Greatness is born from struggle, conflict, and restlessness. The man who settles into domestic comfort ceases to strive. His days are consumed by routine, his nights by obligations. Slowly, the fire of ambition goes out. Nietzsche compared domestic happiness to anesthesia. It dulls the pain of existence, but also dulls the drive to transcend it. Men lose themselves in small joys, small duties, small lives. The great tragedies and triumphs of existence are traded for the quiet safety of a family home. For Nietzsche, this was a betrayal of life itself. Life is meant to be lived dangerously, to be tested, to be burned by ambition. Domestic happiness may feel pleasant, but it is not life, it is half death. And the man who chooses it sacrifices eternity for comfort. Nietzsche did not deny women ambition. On the contrary, he saw in women a powerful will to power, expressed not through conquest or philosophy, but through influence, seduction, and control. While men seek power openly, women seek it subtly, through relationships. Marriage is one of the primary arenas where this will to power manifests. The wife does not need armies or wealth. Her influence over her husband gives her access to both. She becomes the hidden hand shaping his choices, his values, his ambitions. Nietzsche warned, many great men have been destroyed not by enemies, but by wives. This is not because women are evil, but because their instincts drive them to secure and control their environment. For a great man, this influence can be fatal. Instead of serving his destiny, he serves her desires. Instead of creating for eternity, he creates for approval. Nietzsche urged men to see this clearly. Love is never free of power. Behind every embrace is a struggle for dominance. And in marriage, that struggle often ends with the man surrendering his greatness for the woman's security. Marriage does not end with a wife, it leads to children. Nietzsche warned that children, though praised as blessings, become another chain-binding men to domesticity. They demand endless time, resources, and energy. The man's life, once his own, becomes consumed by the survival of the next generation. Nietzsche saw this as nature's greatest trick. Men are lured into reproduction, believing they are leaving a legacy. But in reality, they often abandon their true legacy, their creations, their philosophy, their art for the biological duty of raising children. Nature wins, but greatness loses. He did not oppose fatherhood entirely, but he warned that for higher men, children can be a distraction from destiny. Ordinary men may find fulfillment in family, but the extraordinary man must ask, do I serve eternity better through blood or through creation? For Nietzsche, the latter was the true path. The tyranny of children lies not in their malice, but in their innocence. They demand, and the father must give. But in giving, he sacrifices himself. Nietzsche urged men to consider, is your destiny to raise children or to raise civilization? Nietzsche despised Christianity, and marriage was one reason why. The church sanctified marriage, not to elevate love, but to control men. By turning marriage into a holy duty, religion bound men not only to women, but to the church itself. Nietzsche argued that religion used marriage to weaken men's instincts. Passion, lust, and ambition were redirected into the family unit. The wild, dangerous energy of men was caged in the name of holiness. Instead of warriors and creators, men became obedient husbands and fathers. Marriage under Christianity was especially cruel because it forbade escape. Divorce was condemned, adultery punished. Men who made mistakes were trapped for life, enslaved by vows made in moments of passion. The church knew this, and it used marriage as a prison to ensure obedience. For Nietzsche, this was proof that religion does not protect love, it destroys it. By sanctifying marriage, it turned a natural instinct into a lifelong duty. And in doing so, it robbed men of their freedom, their vitality, and their will to power. Nietzsche often wrote that the greatest men are destroyed not by their enemies, but by those closest to them. In marriage, the enemy is not hatred, but love. The very intimacy of marriage gives the woman the power to wound the man in ways no outsider can. A rival can be defeated, an enemy can be crushed, but a wife's criticism, her demands, her lack of faith, these cut deeper than any sword. Nietzsche saw countless men undone not by the battlefield, but by the bedroom. He warned that the higher a man climbs, the more vulnerable he becomes to intimate sabotage. A great man may withstand the attacks of kings and priests, but not the daily erosion of a wife's doubts, complaints, or resentments. Love becomes the most dangerous battlefield of all. Nietzsche's brutal truth. If you seek greatness, beware not of enemies, but of intimacy. The enemy at your side is far deadlier than the enemy across the field. Modernity loves to speak of marriage as partnership. Two equals walking side by side. Nietzsche scoffed at this. For him, power is never equal. One dominates, the other submits. To believe in equality in marriage is to misunderstand the nature of life itself. He argued that in every marriage, one will inevitably lead, and the other will inevitably follow. This struggle for dominance creates endless conflict. The husband believes he is head of the household, but often finds himself ruled by his wife's will. Nietzsche saw this as hypocrisy, the mask of partnership concealing the reality of control. For great men, this illusion is particularly dangerous. Believing in partnership, they may surrender leadership, trusting that their wives will support them. But instinct drives women toward security, not greatness. The man discovers too late that the partnership was a cage, and his destiny was lost in compromise. Nietzsche's advice was clear. If you are destined for greatness, do not believe in partnership. Believe in solitude, in strength, in self-mastery. True partnership for a great man is not with another person, but with his destiny. Nietzsche never married. His brief encounters with love ended in heartbreak and rejection, most famously with Lou Salome. But for him, this was liberation. He saw in his bachelorhood not failure, but freedom. Friends mocked him for loneliness, but Nietzsche embraced it as the price of greatness. He wrote not as a husband or father, but as a free spirit, unbound by domestic chains. His solitude produced some of the most powerful ideas in Western philosophy, ideas that still shake the world today. Nietzsche's life was a warning and an example. He paid the price of isolation, despair, illness, and madness. But he also left behind works that outlived him, works that no married man burdened by routine could have produced. His refusal of marriage was not cowardice, it was fidelity to his destiny. Through his own life, Nietzsche embodied his brutal truth. Greatness requires sacrifice, and often that sacrifice is love itself. Today, men believe they are free from Nietzsche's warnings. They think modern marriage, with equality and choice, is different, but Nietzsche would laugh. The same instincts still rule. Women still seek security, society still tames men, and marriage still redirects male energy into domesticity. Modern men, Nietzsche would argue, are even weaker than those of his time. They no longer resist marriage, they celebrate it. They no longer see it as a trap, they see it as fulfillment. In their blindness, they march willingly into the cage. Technology, wealth, and comfort have not changed the laws of life. Greatness still demands solitude, struggle, and sacrifice. Marriage still demands compromise, routine, and obedience. The conflict remains, but men have forgotten it. Nietzsche's brutal truth is more urgent now than ever. Modern marriage still traps great men, but now they thank their jailers for the chains. Nietzsche was not against love, but against surrender. He believed that great men must reimagine relationships on their own terms. Instead of binding themselves through contracts and obligations, they must embrace love as fleeting, as beautiful, as dangerous, but never permanent. The alternative path is solitude, freedom, and self-mastery. To love without chains, to create without compromise, to live without kneeling before the demands of society or biology. For Nietzsche, this path was harder, lonelier, but infinitely more rewarding. It was the path of destiny, the path of greatness. He urged men to see beyond the illusions of romance, beyond the herd's praise of marriage. The man who follows this path may walk alone, but he walks toward eternity. His legacy is not a family name, but a creation that outlives generations. Nietzsche's alternative is not for everyone. It is for the few, the rare, the higher men who refuse to be tamed. If you hear his call, know this. Your path will be dangerous, but it will be yours. At the end of his reflections, Nietzsche left men with a chilling warning. Marriage is the most beautiful trap life has to offer. It promises love, companionship, and legacy, but it costs freedom, ambition, and greatness. For ordinary men, this trade may be acceptable, but for the higher man, it is fatal. Nietzsche's brutal truth is this: if you are destined for greatness, marriage may be the very thing that destroys you. Not because women are evil, not because love is wrong, but because the institution itself was built to tame, to domesticate, to chain. He urged men to ask themselves, what is your destiny? Is it comfort, or is it creation? Is it routine, or is it eternity? The choice is yours, but the price is real. And so, Nietzsche's final warning echoes. Beware of the trap. Beware of the comfort that kills. Beware of the love that cages. For the higher man, freedom is worth more than any vow. Before you go, hit that like button, subscribe, and type freedom in the comments if you are ready to resist the oldest trap in history.